No, no bus. A Just Bees book club. Today, for this video, there might be two today. Today, for this video, I have read. I don't know how I do this. It's been a minute since I've yelled for 8 hours about that fucking Doug Dorse book or whatever. Was there some after that? I think there was some after that. um, I finished Witches, Witch Hunting, and Women by Sylvia Federici. It's probably been about a week since I finished it. I have been exhausted by everything in life, and also making a lot of my weird podcast for one person called Thoughts About the Table. This is a short collection of essays by Sylvia Federici, who I guess I should set this up just for context. Um, I think Sylvia Federici is probably maybe the single most important thinker for my own politics, of whom I have never read a book before prior to this one. Um, Learning about the Wages for Housework campaign specifically when I was in college was like really transformative on my thought. I think I was coming at sort of leftism in general and specifically like Marxism very much from a art critical sort of perspective. I was um, fell in love with the Aesthetics and Politics book from it's like a collection of essays from Benjamin, Adorno, Horkheimer, Lukács, and Bloch. Horkheimer might actually not be in there. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was like an argument they had over the course of a couple decades, where they were arguing about the politics of aesthetics. That was really formative for me, and being like, oh, not only does this make some sense, it transforms both how I read media objects and how I read the world. And then, sort of in that pot, the Wages for Housework campaign sort of bubbled up into my consciousness, and I became aware of this group of feminists in the '70s whose main demand was that there should be wages for housework, which I was like, that's dope. And then I looked a little more in, or I heard somebody talk about it. I don't remember exactly. It's been a long time, over a decade, definitely. That not only was this was not just a campaign to be like pay for unpaid labor. It was a campaign to be like, this is an impossible demand because it fundamentally unstructures capitalism. And I was like, yo, okay, this whole reproductive labor thing that I've like kind of skimmed in the bits and pieces of Marx I've read, maybe this is important. And I think throughout the last 15 years or whatever that I've been I started like writing in like 2011, I guess. I was probably writing as early as 2009. So the one of like the major project I've had since then is since like 2009 has been to sort of understand reproductive labor and its relation to art and aesthetic and media. And by art, of course, I mean things like Rene Magritte paintings and Kingdom Hearts, and Ti videos and shit. Which mm, bummer, bummer that dude sucks so fucking bad. Um, this is a collection of essays that came out, which is Witch Hunting in Women, is a collection of essays from Sylvia Federici that came out from PM Press in 2018. Um, it is sort of by admission a mixture of like things that Federici is interested at that moment in continuing to research, specifically around witches. Her big sort of canonical text is Caliban and the Witch, which I still have not read, but I really need to. Um, and a sort of popular pamphlet version of Caliban and the Witch that does away with the case studies, the big research sections, and sort of just puts together a thing you can a what is it the index starts on page 98. So like, yeah, the bibliography is before that. Yeah, the conclusion is pages 87 and 88. Right, like it's a 80-page book. Um, like 6 essays or so in 2 parts. 7 essays. Um, that's not even true because the first one is just oh, that is true because the chapter one is a translation of a ooh, I don't remember which particular do the Elsker Vortland, which is definitely a We Love Our Country was brought to my attention by women at a feminist gathering in Copenhagen, who also provided the translation reproduced in this volume. It looks like maybe Denmark. Um, it's just a translation of a Denmark folk song, a Scandinavian folk song, let's say. But the introduction and the conclusion also probably count as like full essays. So I guess 7 is right. Or is that 8? Whatever. Um, yeah, it goes through a couple. The part one is revisiting capital accumulation and the European witch hunt. And then part two is new forms of capital accumulation and witch hunting in our time. So the first roughly half, a little less, maybe it's maybe closer to a third than half, is sort of revisiting essays that she had written prior. Most of them pulling on threads from Caliban and the Witch, I presume, and have been told in this book. And then the second two are sort of her continued, the second two essays that are make up the back 2/3 of this book are her continued sort of research into what witch hunts are happening currently, what they say about the world, whether that breaks her previous sort of assumptions or conclusions. They don't. I think this would be a much longer book if they did. But yeah, sort of the major thrust of witch hunting in women is that witch hunts are a mechanism by which capital what Marx called primitive accumulation, what David Harvey would eventually sort of rejigger into accumulation by dispossession. Um, but Federici specifically uses primitive accumulation here, which I think is probably important in a way that I don't quite grasp the nuances of because I've been out of the academy for a decade, and as this channel shows, I primarily read bullshit. I primarily read bullshit. That's good. Yeah, sure. Um, yes. So, sort of the central argument here is that, or the argumentative thrust here, or the thesis, I guess, is another way of putting that, um, is that witch hunts are a sort of specific mechanism by which primitive accumulation happens that are focused on women, which, yeah, primitive accumulation, sort of roughly broadly being the phase in which certain um, structural things are happening that allow for the accumulation of capital rather than just like money or status like an aristocracy thing. Um, that when that occurs, and in Marx it was like I think this is a debated concept in some ways, but it's the like sort of end of feudal era when there are merchants, but they are not the dominant class before the bourgeois revolutions of the 1700s, when they were able to start accumulating wealth that they could turn into capital, which is money that makes money for itself. It's things like in the Industrial Revolution, it's things like machines that can produce mass market goods. So you get enough money, you make a machine, you buy a machine that can, sew. You buy a sewing machine at an industrial scale, and that's that outlay of money into a machine, which she calls dead labor at the machine itself, because it was labored upon. It was made to produce value, but then the dead labor that was used to make it continues to produce value in the way that labor is the only thing that can produce value according to the labor theory of value. Um, Primitive accumulation is the accumulation of wealth that brings about the possibility of a capitalist class of a bourgeois um, of a bourgeoisie specifically, I guess, who um, can gain enough power by their ability to purchase capital to go on and change the mode of production by way of things like the French Revolution and the American Revolution, um, or the U.S. Revolution or whatever. Um, Federici sees the witch hunts that happen both in the U.S. and in Europe. I think especially Europe, from my understanding of Caliban and the Witch, which again I have not read, um, as ways specifically of engaging in the enclosure of the commons, which is the British term for it. But this is the moment when, and by moment I mean like 100 years, when maybe 200. Dates are terrible for me. When there were these things called the commons in Britain. They were like enshrined in law. They were just large swaths of land that were available to specifically the peasantry, the feudal serfs. They were large areas of land that were not made productive in any way other than by the people who were using them to produce things like their food, the things that they eat. Um, the enclosure is this series of uh, both social and legal actions that end up basically privatizing public property in sort of more modern parlance. Um, and Federici's big argument, as I understand it, is that the witch hunts that happen in Europe around the same time as the enclosure of the commons, the ones that happen in the U.S. around the same time as sort of the ascendance of capital and well, primitive accumulation again, um, are not this temporal coincidence is not a coincidence. It is a function of primitive accumulation of capital, that there is a need to push certain kinds of women out of public life, and that doing it by way of accusations of witchcraft that turn into specific kinds of torture and murder is uh, is a consistent historical um, demonstration of the moment of primitive accumulation. This is why this is split into the then and now sort of format. What did I say? Revisiting capital accumulation and the European witch hunt in part one. So going back to the European witch hunts, and then part two being new forms of capital accumulation and witch hunting in our time, which is focused on areas in which Federici argues primitive accumulation is happening right now. I think she largely focuses on India and Africa, which is a choice that she seems very self conscious of it being uh, filled with landmines. Maybe let's say difficult. Um, but yeah, I think I was gonna try to do this thing where I like give this high level and then sort of like go bit by bit and talk about each bit. But I think like this is the thing about like a 90-page book. It's not like there's a ton of like corroborating evidence that there are footnotes or there and yeah footnotes at the end of every chapter. She cites sources to a certain degree, but this is a popular booklet. This is meant to be a thing that somebody like me, who's been out of the academy for 12 years or whatever, can pick up and just like read, um, which is made more difficult by like a huge citational apparatus, thanks to Game Study Buddies for making that a term that I apparently just pluck out of my brain without thinking about it. Game Study Buddies is a much better thing about books than this is. Um, yeah, I think I just want to I guess talk about one specific one, which is there's a essay at the end of part one called "On the Meaning of Gossip" that is like really fucking cool. Um, Federici basically tracks the etymology of, or not the etymology, but the sort of the descriptive usage of the word gossip from there is the also the etymology deriving from the Old English terms God and sib. I don't know how to. I don't know Old English. I don't know Old English even a little bit. Sib, and then parenthetically akin. Gossip originally meant godparent, one who stands in a spiritual relation to the child to be baptized. In time, however, the term was used with a broader meaning. In early modern England, the word gossip the word gossip referred to companions in childbirth. In early modern England, the word gossip referred to companions in childbirth, not limited to the midwife. It also became a term for women friends, with no necessary derogatory connotations. So basically, it's a very short, like 8 page essay about the way that the word gossip starts, and I guess initially as etymologically as godparent, but becomes for a few hundred years basically a thing that people say that just means she's friends with her. Like they're, oh, she has all of her gossips around, meaning that's this collection of women, and that around the time of what is does she give a right what was it? Then in 1547, a proclamation was issued forbidding women to meet together and babble and talk, and ordering husbands to keep their wives in their houses. Female friendships were one of the targets of the witch hunts, as in the course of the trials, women, accused women were forced under torture to denounce each other, friends turning in friends, daughters turning in their mothers. It was in this context that gossip turned from a word of friendship and affection into a word of denigration and ridicule. So yes, the like I guess mid 1500s, um, the word gossip goes from meaning female friends to meaning like women friends to meaning the thing we think of when we say the word gossip today. I mean, like idle chatter, backbiting, stuff like that in a very particularly gendered way. It is a really compelling little essay in the middle of a bunch of really compelling little essays. Yeah, I am deeply glad that I read this. I think it's cool. I think it's cool and fun and um, like I mean, subject matter is not fun, obviously. But it's a nice thing to read and have read. I think. So yeah, that does it for this episode of No Buzz. Thank you for not watching.